Humans of the cardboard. Today we are talking about Atlanteans. I think it's something that is kind of on the horizon here. Sooner than later, we're going to end up getting a really big wave of Atlantean support. It's almost all but confirmed. If you don't know, the formula Konami's been rolling with, specifically the OCG, and we end up getting the cards later on sometimes. But they've been on this pattern with structure decks. They usually do like one new structure deck a year, but then they also do a retrain structure deck. It's called their Structure Deck R series. And so what they've been doing is like quite literally been going straight in order of the structure decks that were released, 10 plus years ago, and kind of just subsequently giving them more updated support in modern day structure decks. It's a really good place to be if you're a fan of one of these decks because they get 8 whole cards of support. I would argue the last couple have been pretty big hits, even if they're not like straight up high tier meta. You know, Trap Trick's going to be pretty playable. Dark World, everybody recognize how powerful the structure deck is, right? Even Agents, like you look at the Agent cards, you're like, they got some good ass cards. They needed a lot, they got a good amount. And so Atlantean is kind of not necessarily absolutely next in line, but it is down the line a little bit. And I thought it was one of the more interesting ones here. Technically, Dragons Collide should be next, but we also just got a ton of Chaos support between, like literally every set. So I don't know if they're going to actually go through with this one. They could. I wouldn't be surprised if they just skip it and go like, we just did a ton of Chaos support. We don't need to do another just generic Chaos Dragon, structure deck. Then we have a Six Samurai one. This one's weird as well because it didn't like kick off an archetype, whereas like the Atlantean and Fire King one like kicked off their own archetypes, and a lot of them did that in the same way. Whereas this one, I believe the Six Samurais already existed. They just also gave them a structure deck just for more support. But whatever, they definitely could, and I wouldn't be surprised. Six Samurai is pretty popular. And then we get to, the Atlantean structure deck, Realm of the Sea Emperor, getting redone. I think it's important to note that, this one's technically third in line right now, but we could skip Dragons Collide. We could even potentially skip Six Samurai and then end up on this as the next one. Could be this year. Who knows, but I think at the absolute latest, 2 years from now. Hopefully we don't have to wait that long, though. So today, talking about Atlanteans, they're in a very interesting position because they kind of had been sitting around as like kind of a lower tier rogue deck that like you kind of respected what it could do because it could hand rip you, it could set up multiple interruptions, it was very good going first, barring multiple hand traps, but going second definitely struggled. And it has so many powerful tools because the other thing with Atlantean isn't a full-on archetype. Atlantean is one of like 3 or 4 separate archetypes you play within the Atlantean Mermail deck. It's kind of just water good stuff. And I like it for that. But looking at the Atlantean cards we already have that I think will matter the most more than anything. Definitely Neptibus. This will almost assuredly still remain the best starter. It's insane. It sends an Atlantean as cost to then add an Atlantean. And when you pair that with a card like Dragoons, that's already insane. To like send a Dragoon that's going to get you another add and add another Dragoon is very, very powerful. Still a 1-card combo. Still very, very potent. And Dragoon not being once per turn as well. Very, very scary. From there, the only other 2 cards that I think are like that relevant for Atlantean specifically is Heavy Infantry and Marksman. They pop face down and face up cards respectively when they are sent from hand to grave by a water monster effect, which is what so many of these water decks like to do. Like literally something in all of them. I believe Swap Frog triggers this. Multiple of the Mermails trigger this, right? Like everything triggers this. So just keep that in mind. But these are really the only cards from like the original structure that I think have really any sway. And these guys are only fringe, especially the guy who targets set cards, Marksman, like obviously not as good as popping face ups. So we'll see. Moving on from there, we have a bunch of other engines that you still need to keep in mind. Mermail is a big one. Abystius being one of the better starter/extenders as well. He's another card that pitches any water from hand, so triggers a lot of other stuff. But really, really powerful. You need to definitely keep in mind Mermail. And there's also an argument that like Mermail really hasn't gotten support in forever either. I know they got their Link Monster, but that Link Monster is like, it's definitely one of the most mid Link Monsters ever made during like the Link Vrains era for an archetype, for sure. Deep Sea, another really interesting one. They play this card, but they also have the card that like hand rips a card. One of their archetype cards where you pitch him plus another water to like look at your opponent's hand and banish a card till the end of the turn. Helps you beat hand traps, help you get knowledge on what your opponent's playing. stuff like that. But Diva is just an insane extender because it just summons Neptibus from deck, and then Neptibus obviously can do his thing. This card was better when we had Hulk, and I think that's a very important note as well to keep in mind is Hulk's banned. I don't think Hulk's coming back for a while, and with Hulk being gone, we're in a really weird spot where we have to just kind of move on, and we'll take a look at the extra deck stuff as well, but that's definitely going to be something super interesting. Ice Jade. This is a newer development, and we haven't seen a ton. I just haven't seen a ton of this deck, period. But I do think with some of the new tools Ice Jade has gotten, it started off looking really like mediocre. But then as of late, we've actually seen some pretty potent Ice Jade cards, and I would not be surprised to see Ice Jade appear as another additional engine in the deck. Now, it's only going to be some of their better cards. I don't think it's going to be everything. Specifically, their new extender that's coming out in Cyberstorm Access is just like an insane generic water card. And again, it's one of those extenders that just pitches a water from hand, so it triggers a bunch of stuff, like Dragoon. Very good. As far as singleton cards go in the main deck, I'll just mention Moonland Glacier. You have to keep this card in mind. Dragoon searches this, so any standard Atlantean combo is just setting up Moonland Glacier to rip 2 from your opponent's hand. Got to keep that in mind. So yeah, and then when you come back and we take a look and like we look down here at like what the extra deck monsters we have available are, yeah, there's a lot of cool tools, right? Your Adamant Spit Arisen Dragites, right? Some of the deep sea monsters, your Croco Dragons, your Abyss Dwellers, your Bahamut Sharks, stuff like that. You know, and then even like Coral Anemone is nice, and then the Mermail Link is nice as well. There's a lot of like nice little pieces here. But I'll tell you what, one thing that is hugely missing is whatever the fuck Hulk was doing for the deck. And what Hulk was doing was, oh, just make Hulk, and we should be okay, because we can summon Fishborg Launcher out of the deck. Fishborg Launcher then can, it's not even listed here as a recommended card, which is crazy, but Fishborg Launcher and Hulk like starts getting you into like other crazy combos, and you're kind of off to the races. But now we are in a position where like your extra deck doesn't really generate you much advantage, and I think that's kind of where Konami needs to look potentially, is giving Atlanteans their own Link monster that maybe only takes fishes, sea serpents, and aquas maybe, because that's generally the only types they use, right? Atlanteans are almost all sea serpent. Mermails kind of flow between all three. Deep seas, I think, are generally sea serpents, and Ice Jades sit in aquas, and same thing with frogs. I didn't throw frogs on here, but frogs are also aqua. So that's kind of where we end up, is maybe we end up with a Link 2 that requires only those 3 types, or maybe it's a Link 3 or something that gets us advantage, gets our engine going, does what Hulk did, but Hulk was so generically abusable, it had to see a hit somewhere. So I'd like to see that. I'd also, I mean, I don't know, maybe some extenders. The problem is, because of all these other engines, you have so much stuff. I'm like, what do you give Atlantean specifically? Maybe they go with Atlantean pure route, where some of the support is very strong, but it's like pure Atlantean, or maybe it's pure Sea Serpent, so it is starting to lock you out of some of this other stuff, right? Bisteus being an aqua, a lot of the Ice Jades being aqua. Frogs being aqua, so maybe you can still play like Deep Seas and still like Moonland Glacier, but it's like a super hard lock into Sea Serpents. Maybe that's a route. Sea Serpent is such an underdeveloped type that I don't think there's going to be too much that's going to just be super, super abusable there. But I think that's something that could come out of this. I mean, think about 8 cards. If they were to give them, like I'm saying, an extra deck monster that kind of does, like, and replaces what Hulk did for the deck, just maybe in a different way, but like still similarly easy to make. You can make it early on, and then it just helps you flow into the rest of your deck and the rest of your combos. What else do you need? 7 other cards. There's so many tools that are, like, all these archetypes already flow into Atlantean. So where do they go? What do they make from there? It's really interesting. It'll be really interesting to see. Maybe there'll be some spells and traps, because most of these engines are just monsters on monsters. This is definitely a deck that could just be like a Sekka's Light deck, because you just play so many monsters. All these engines are just like pure monster engines for the most part. But yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm not going to pretend like there's not. There's so many routes they could go with it. These are just some of my basic thoughts, like sitting back a ways away and knowing that there's just already a ton of really good generic water support in the game. But yeah, just some of my thoughts there. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down below. Also, Fire Kings. I didn't even mention this. Fire Kings would be after, Atlanteans. But this is another really interesting one that I think could be cool. Just like being able to do Nephthys, but right, but correctly. But yeah, I want to know your guys' thoughts down below. Please let me know your thoughts on Atlanteans if they were to get a structure deck, assuming it would just be the same formula, 8 brand new cards. Where do you think they go with it? Where do you think they should go with it? What specific areas of the deck do you think need something to kind of get back on track? Maybe there's a route where we just get Moulin Glacier banned and then just actually make like water good stuff, just a good deck, and go from there. That could be something. I don't know. But yeah, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't and you want to see more stuff from me down the line, more fun discussions while we're in between news, while we're in between sets and formats changing. I'd love to hear your guys' stuff on that. But I'll see you in the next one. Peace.